This is the video lecture for Lesson 11 in Clayton Croy's A Primer to Biblical Greek. In this lesson, we will discuss the imperfect middle and passive indicative forms, as well as the adverbial use of kai and other similar expressions. To begin with a brief review of the imperfect tense, which was introduced in a previous lecture, remember that the imperfect tense denotes imperfective or continuous action in the past time. The augment, which occurs directly in front of the verb stem, indicates that the imperfect tense is a secondary tense, or a tense that occurs in past time. Also, remember what we have said earlier about the middle and passive voices. Remember that the middle voice indicates that the subject acts, but with particular reference to itself either directly or indirectly. So in other words, the verb refers back to or involves the subject. The passive voice, in contrast, is when the subject is acted upon by another. And in a previous lecture, we discussed how that performer of the verb is often indicated by the preposition hupo plus the genitive, which we would translate by, or by the dative case, which is known as the impersonal instrument of means. In either case, we would translate by. And then finally, we discussed deponent verbs, which are essentially verbs that have a middle or a passive form, but have an active meaning. All right, so here is the chart of the imperfect middle passive indicative of the verb luo. And you can see, like previous charts, this one is color-coded. And so here they are. Eluomen is I was loosing. Eluu is you singular were loosing. Elueta, he, she, or it was loosing. Eluametha, we were loosing. Elueste, y'all were loosing. Eluanta, they were loosing. You'll notice that there is the augment throughout indicated by the brown font. You'll also notice that the first person plural and second person plural personal endings are identical to the ones that we see in the present middle passive indicative forms, and that the third singular and third plural personal endings are similar to those in the present middle passive indicative, but slightly different. All right, while we have that chart up, let's provide a few further notes. To begin with, as with the present tense, the forms of the middle and passive voices are identical in the imperfect tense. So only context will indicate whether it's a middle or a passive form. Verbs that are deponent in the present tense will also be deponent in the imperfect tense. Here's a study strategy, is get in the habit of drawing a line between the augment, the stem, and personal endings of verbs. Those are the things we need to begin to be really good at recognizing as we see them in Greek sentences. All right, the next part of this lecture I've entitled Small Words That Make My Head Hurt. So the first of these is the adverbial kai, which we would translate as also or even. You've previously learned about kai when it is connecting two parts, so it would just be and in those cases. Here, the adverbial kai is just when there's one element, and so there's not the and connotation, but an also or an even. In addition to this special use of kai, there are correlative constructions. So the first of these is kai, which we would translate as both and. Then there is te, which we would translate either as so, or not only, but also. And then finally, we would have te kai, which we would translate as and. Now there's also a negative form of these sort of correlative constructions, and we see that with ute, which means neither nor. So here's my study tip. Memorize these as vocabulary. There's no reason for them not to be sort of just vocabulary cards that you go through regularly. So add these correlative constructions to your vocabulary list for Lesson 11. Here are just a few examples, and as you see these examples, I would really remind you of the benefit of marking conjunctions. So if you put a triangle around your conjunctions or something, that will help you see these special uses of those conjunctions. So the first one says, Su pistues eston thean, taut agathan, alakai ta daimonia pistiusin. This says, you believe in God. This is a good thing. But even the demons believe. And so you see that alakai, it's not kai being used to indicate one or two or more things, but it's used in this adverbial way. Even. Kai hoi agathoi, kai hoi kakoi. This is an instance of the both and. So both the good and the evil. So you see how kai and kai are connected to say both and. And then you see this example. Hemas te ha edelphas didaske, humas te he adelphe didaske. And this is an example of the as and then so. As the brother is teaching us, so the sister is teaching you all. So you see as and so. And then logoi te kai erga krinontai. And this is it almost seems redundant. So we would just translate this as words and deeds are judged. And finally, the negative forms, theoi lithu ute akusin ute legusin. And so we would translate this as gods of stone neither hear nor speak. So you see that ute means neither nor. All right, so let's get started with the first exercise from the practice and review exercises. Hoi ophthalmoi tu technu etherapeuanta to logo tu prophetu. Again, I would recommend that you begin by bracketing off the prepositional phrases and genitive phrases. That will help you identify sort of the core sentence. And from there, I would recommend that you identify the verbs. So in this case, we see one verb, e therapeuanto, and if we separate this out with the augment, then the stem, and then the personal ending, that helps us see that it's imperfect, middle passive indicative, third person plural. And then finally, we want to find the subject and identify other parts of the sentence. So in this case, there's only one noun that occurs in the nominative case, hoi ophthalmoi, and that indicates that's our subject. And so from there, we can render a translation pretty comfortably. So the eyes of the child were being healed by the word of the prophet. So again, we would parse etherapeuanta as imperfect, passive, indicative, third plural. And we would see these two genitive constructions, tu technu and tu prophetu, as doing what genitives do, limiting or defining. So tu technu tells us whose eyes or which eyes. Well, they're the ones of the child. And then tu prophetu tells us which word. It's the word of the prophet. This is a good example of the imperfect passive indicative. And again, that form of etherapeuanta, just so we're clear, is identical to the middle voice. But the context, especially that dative phrase to logo, indicates that we have a passive construction. All right, that is the end of lesson 11. We will be seeing more verb forms in future lessons. So begin to do what you need to do to distinguish these different verb tenses and voices that we've been learning so that things can be as clear as possible when we go to the practice and review exercises. Thank you.